Today, we'll take a look at some of the most monumental product fails ever made for the World Cup. You know, some of those products that just made people talk, what is going on here? Or simply didn't work that well. Now, of course, we've already looked at the most innovative products and the best boots and all that, positive jazz with products made for the World Cup. But I feel we also kind of need to discuss some of the stuff that didn't work out as planned or, just straight up sucked. So without further ado, let's get on it with the list. Number 5 is probably best explained by this sound. It's the Vuvuzela. Now, originally used in the southern part of Africa to summon tribespeople for community gatherings. Well, it was also made famous in football circles in 2009 at the Confederations Cup, and then later, of course, at the World Cup in South Africa in 2010. Why, you ask? Well, listen. But apart from that, it makes this really infernal monotone sound that's not only really loud, but as you can also probably tell from the last 30 seconds or so, really f***ing annoying. In fourth, we have, admittedly, a little bit of a controversial one. The adidas Jabulani from the World Cup in South Africa in 2006. Before you crucify me here, let me just say that I think this is a very iconic ball, a very spectacular football, but also, well, there were a lot of players complaining about it. I know, players have been complaining about the World Cup footballs ever since 1994 and the Adidas Questra that was made a lot lighter than previously, but it seems to me that the Jabulani got the roughest treatment of it all because of its increasingly faster and more unpredictable flight pattern that was a veritable nightmare for goalkeepers all over the world. Now, don't get me wrong here, I think the Jabulani is really fun to play with if you're just out there shooting on goal, because it moves completely unpredictably, but with that said, it was and is a very lively football, and to be honest, I probably wouldn't trust it and rely on its stability and unpredictability if I was playing a really important match, say, the World Cup final. Third place goes to Cameroon's sleeveless Puma shirts from 2002 that they first wore at the African Nations Cup and intended to wear at the World Cup in South Korea and Japan. But there was only one obstacle, a pretty big obstacle: FIFA. They didn't like the shirts, so Cameroon were forced to really stitch black sleeves onto the sleeveless shirts, only then to use those at the World Cup. That's how it goes. I mean, the sleeveless shirts were cool and all, but the team basically looked like guys who had football practice at 3 and basketball practice at 5, and they didn't really have time to change from their football gear to basketball. I mean, cool idea. It made a lot of PR noise, but maybe Puma should have checked the rules before they cut off the sleeves. Second place is the adidas F50.6 TUNIT from the World Cup in 2006 in Germany, which kind of set itself apart from all the other products on the list by being fully customizable. Now, in my hands here, I have the F50.8 TUNIT, which is a little bit better than the F50.6, but it still kinda sucked. But anyway, what Adidas did here was to give you a completely interchangeable set of uppers, insoles that acted as the stiffening of the outsole board, and then of course, different stud options. And while the idea was actually excellent, well, the execution sadly wasn't. We saw a lot of the insole boards really snapping, so the boots were falling apart, the studs were falling out and gone missing, and then there's also the fact that Lionel Messi really opted to go into the F30.6 after wearing the F50.6 TUNIT for the World Cup. So it turns out that he didn't really like it that much either. I call fail. For honorable mentions, I have, believe it or not, another Cameroon kit from 2004. So while it might not strictly be a World Cup related launch, well, it almost ended up costing them 6 points for the 2006 World Cup qualifiers anyway, because basically it was a one-piece kit. FIFA didn't like it and they decided to wear it anyway, but it didn't matter because they didn't qualify for the 2006 World Cup in the end, so there you go. Now, the other thing I want to bring up is Brazil's celebration of the World Cup championship in 1950. Basically, having newspapers printed that said, "Congratulations, world champions." They even made flipping coins printed on them saying, "Brazil World Cup champions." The president made a speech to the players saying that they're reaching the echelons of the greatest players of all time. But the small problem was that Brazil didn't win the World Cup in 1950 because what happened is called Maracanazo. They basically ended up losing the final game to Uruguay. Now, all Brazilians were really confident of beating Uruguay, but they lost. And it also led to the events that they basically ditched their white kits. They were simply too ashamed to ever wear them again. And also made this competition of designing their new look. And it ended up looking like we know it today, yellow and blue. Pretty iconic. Now, the last thing I want to bring up for honorable mentions, it's a long one, but it's basically cup noodles that appear to have been designed to look like Neymar's hair. I may or may not be sarcastic. But number one for me is the Nike Mercurial Superfly 2, which was also released in 2010 for the World Cup in South Africa. Would I call this the Vuvuzela of boots? Perhaps not quite, it's not quite as annoying, but to be honest, it wasn't a very good football boot either. The upper was really stiff. It had a pretty high toe box, as you can see, and then of course it also weighed 236 grams, which back then even was pretty unheard of for a mercurial boot. And then of course also, it featured what is perhaps the stupidest piece of technology I've ever seen as a boot nerd, the NikeSENSE stud, which was basically supposed to give you better traction by having this claw-like function where the stud would actually move out of the sole plate itself when you apply pressure on the inside. And while it technically did move a little bit, I think you would need a microscope to really see any notable difference. Honestly, it didn't set the world on fire. And while the Superfly 2 Elite here is definitely, really high on my list when it comes to look, performance-wise, it's probably sitting in the other end of the scale. So there you go, my friends. What is, in my opinion, the top 5 biggest product failures ever for the World Cup? But what's your take on the matter? Did I forget something on the list? Well, irregardless, you should let me know in the comment section right down below. And then, of course, also go do yourself a favor. Subscribe to our channel with the notifications on, of course, to join the early gang and see all our videos the moment they drop. After you've done that, you can go and take a look at Football Heaven by clicking the link and going to unisportstore.com right over there. And maybe even treat yourself to a little boot, a little shirt, whatever you fancy. And finally, if you want to watch more cool top 5 videos, you can click the playlist right here. So maybe I'll see you in one of those videos. And with that said, guys, I'm signing off. Cheerio.